But why should Americans care about what happens with what Israel does to its neighbors?
There are two reasons.
Okay.
One reason is, I think, the just humane, moral reason, that we should and do care about other people. I think many people feel, well, what the Nazis did was horrible. If I were back then, I would have stopped it and opposed it. So I think we feel there's a moral imperative to, when children are being killed and tortured, that we should do something about it in general. However, in this case, there's a much more significant reason. They're using our money to do this. Our tax money is being used to create misery, to intentionally create misery, as we're seeing in Gaza, to intentionally starve people to death. Our money is doing that. Our weaponry is doing that. Now, that should matter to people. I think it matters to me, matters to most people I find that actually know about that. If that doesn't matter to you, it's out of sight, out of mind. You know, that you can live that way if you want to. However, this is creating great hostility to the United States. You know, you cannot do this. You cannot fund what Israel is doing. You cannot attack Iraq and destroy Iraq, get Israel to push us into attacking Iran, destroying Iran, and think that you can get away with it forever. So I have 8 grandchildren. I want them to live in a prosperous, safe, honorable country, and these policies are endangering their future.
Well, first, Netanyahu has played Biden and Trump like a Stradivarius. You read a TikTok of the negotiations and the talks between Trump and Netanyahu. Netanyahu's playing chess, Trump's playing checkers, and probably very badly. And the next thing that our viewers should look for, the next big decision is, will Trump order our planes to start refueling the Israeli combat jets? And will we deliver the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs that could be used in an attempt to take down the nuclear facility at Fort Howe? Very simple. That's the next step. Americans should weigh in. They should make their feelings known, and they should hope that President Trump's pride and his advisors tell him it's time for him to tell Netanyahu no.
In 2024, American taxpayers gave Israel $63 million per day. $63 million per day to a very tiny, quite wealthy country. Most people don't know that because the US media hardly ever mention it. But if you look at the Congressional Research Service, that's completely accurate. What happened with me is I'm just a sort of normal, average American, I feel. My background is journalism. I was the editor of a small weekly newspaper back in 2000. And that's the time when what's called the Second Intifada began in the Palestinian territories and in Israel. Intifada just means throwing off of oppression. It just means shaking off. So that was in the news for a bit that fall, 2000. And just out of curiosity, my youngest son had just started college, so I had more time. I started following the news coverage on Israel-Palestine. I'd never looked into it before. Like many Americans, I'm very sympathetic to Israel. You know, we're very aware of the Holocaust. But I'd never studied that issue and knew very little about it. So I started following the newspaper coverage and especially radio coverage, etc. And after a while, as a journalist, I noticed that I was getting very one-sided coverage. I was noticing that we heard from and about Israelis in great detail, as I wanted. But then we almost never heard from and about Palestinians, certainly not in the equivalent quantity and detail. So, you know, I wanted the full story, and I could see that we were not getting it. Google and the internet was just becoming to be available to people like me. So I decided to do some searches and see what I could find. And I discovered that there were excellent reports from the region itself. There were Israeli newspapers online, there were Palestinian media, there were many human rights people there that were giving firsthand real-time accounts of what was going on in fall of 2000. And I learned that large numbers of unarmed protesters, Palestinian protesters, were being shot every day. Many of them were children being shot in the head, large numbers. And this was being covered up in the news reports. You know, when I listened to NPR or the New York Times or the San Francisco Chronicle, they weren't reporting on that. So after a few months of looking into this more and more, I became pretty astounded at what I was finding. I felt that this was the biggest cover-up I had ever seen, and we've all, you know, by my age, I've seen a lot of them, that this seemed like the biggest one. So I quit my job. I was in Sausalito, and I traveled over to Gaza and the West Bank in early 2001, February and March of 2001. Traveled around by myself with my notebook and a small camera throughout the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and I saw what was going on. I saw entire neighborhoods were bullet riddled. In some places, it reminded me of pictures I'd seen of World War II. Just entire neighborhoods were in ruins. This was in early 2001, before 9/11, before Hamas had come to power, before a single rocket had been fired from Gaza. It was like that. I saw children that had been shot, often in the back. One little boy had been shot in the head. I found that all you had to do was go to the nearest hospital, and you saw people and many children who had been shot by Israeli soldiers. And these were children in their own neighborhoods. And, you know, some people, the way the news reports give it, they think that Palestinians are invading Israel. These were in Gaza, in Rafah, Khan Yunis, Gaza City, Bethlehem was being shelled, places in the West Bank, Ramallah.
I can just tell you in my lifetime, in the last 40 years, if you look at our track record really has not been good. We've gone in with just incredible, great intentions to save people, to save countries, and it really has not worked out well. We have figured out a way to go in and get involved, but we have had a very difficult time trying to figure a way to stop wars and to pull out gracefully. I mean, look at Afghanistan. That's the most typical, and I go back as far as Vietnam. I mean, we just have not had good luck. Look at Libya. We have had so many regime changes over there, and things have not turned out well. So, and I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't necessarily be involved in this. It's a very precarious situation right now because of comments, and not just comments alone, actions. And actions speak louder than words. The actions that Iran has played over the last 20, 25-year period in supporting groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, PIG. I mean, there's just so many groups that they're out there actively supporting and that are still calling for the destruction of Israel and killing American troops and attacking American troops. I mean, this goes on today. But getting back to the old saying of, you know, actions have consequences. President Trump, during his last administration, when he canceled and pulled us out of the 5-country agreement, and you were right, Darius, it was Russia, China, United States, Britain, France, and Germany, the 5-country agreement, who actually worked out an Iran nuclear program that Iran agreed to, and it was to monitor them. And it was only good till 1935, but it allowed Iran to build nuclear reactors for peaceful purposes, for power, for energy. They have a right to do that. They just couldn't enrich it any further than that. We had monitors, we had humans on the ground, we had cameras in all of their facilities. Like I said, they were cooperating. Was it the best agreement? No, it had a short-term limit on it, but you got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end of any negotiations. It was a start. It was allowing us to be in there and to watch them. And for whatever reason, President Trump at that time said, this is one of the worst agreements I've ever seen, and he pulls us out. What is he doing today? Today, right now, as we speak, other than sending aircraft carriers and troops back into that region, he's trying to negotiate with the Iranians on a new agreement. We shouldn't be negotiating a new agreement. We should still have another 9-10 years left of the agreement that was already in operation. He should have never pulled us out. It was one of those off-the-cuff, last-minute decisions, or quick decisions that he made without proper consultation with the world, not just Americans, not just American politicians, with at least the 4 other countries. Right now, if we were still in that agreement and Iran was violating the nuclear deal, you would have the United States and 4 other countries getting ready to take action against Iran, not Israel and not the United States. And I can't blame Israel for the position they're in right now, because we have lost the ability to monitor their program. And if their intelligence is correct and they are getting that close, or they do have enough of the enriched fuel to start building the nuclear weapons, then yes, it is a very, very, very big problem. And not one that you can just win by air power. You can't just go in there and bomb the hell out of them and say, okay, we finished this. It can't be done. The Nazis learned that back in World War II. You can't just bomb. At some point, you got to put boots on the ground. And do we really want to go that direction here?
Just very quickly, not relying on anybody's reporting, I read the IAEA report today. It very clearly states that Iran, 3 weeks away from having enough enriched uranium to produce 9 weapons-grade bombs. That's very clear in the report. It's undisputable. I'm not relying on the New York Times, Washington Post, or anybody else. I read the report myself. Finally, just my observation on tonight. We're talking about problems in Israel. Even though it's supposed to be a democracy, it's more of a tyrannical dictatorship with Netanyahu doing whatever it takes to stay in power. We talk about Iran. They have elections. They're as phony as can be. The supreme leader rules the country. In our country, we have a democracy, but we also have a man who wants to be king and a tyrant and is trampling all over the Constitution. The best way to stay out of these entanglements, the best way to stay safe and prosperous, is to respect the Constitution, follow the rule of law, don't complain, and win elections.
The U.S. and other agencies consistently say that Israel is not developing a nuclear weapon. Israel has been claiming for 30 years that they're just weeks or months away from a nuclear weapon. They keep saying, they've been saying the same thing for decades. The unanimous version from everybody is that they're not doing it. They're enriching waste. For a while there was a complaint by the international agency about it, that Israel wasn't being as open as they should be, but they did not say that it was developing a nuclear weapon. So that that claim is inaccurate. The other thing is that what Iran was doing, that many of us applaud, is it was one of the few places that supported Palestinian human rights. During all this time, there's been great oppression in Gaza and the West Bank and inside Israel itself. This has been going on for a great deal of time. I've been there, I've studied it. This is 20 years of studying that I'm speaking from. Very few people wanted to, there's a very powerful pro-Israel lobby in this country, so most people don't speak out. Similarly, in Europe, there's a pro-Israel lobby in Europe. The Gulf states, the Arab world, the leaders talk about it, but they don't do anything. So one of the few countries that actually stood up, the Egyptian government used to stand up for Palestinians. They were bought off with a peace treaty that the US paid for. So we're now paying Egypt huge amounts of money, millions of dollars every year, to buy them out from supporting human rights for Palestinians. The Jordanian government was bought off by our tax money. Another agreement was made a few decades ago with Jordan, in which they would keep getting money from the US taxpayers, which they do every year. These are the 2 other countries after Israel that got lots of our money, and it's to buy them off from supporting Palestinians. So the Iranian regime may or may not be problematic in a lot of ways, the way a lot of places around the world, the way the Shah was, but it was the reason that it's being attacked is not because of its treatment of the people there. It's because Israel has been wanting to attack Iran for a long time. As I'm sure you know, the reason that we invaded Iraq was because Israel partisans and Israel itself pushed us into that disastrous war. This is well documented. Ever since that time, they've been trying to push us into a war against Iran. This has all been documented in many documents in Israel that have come out. Project for a New American Century, In Defense of the Realm are some of the documents. The Yanan Oded report that was calling for the destruction of Iran, Iraq, Syria, some of the other places.
You know, Darius, I wrote a short piece here recently about this, and it's ironic that you basically have just set forth many of the same comments that I made, in that growing up in California, in Central California, you know, we provide over 50% of all of the fruits and nuts, and yeah, a lot of the country has a field day with that comment alone. But the food that the people eat, and most Americans, being someone who's been assigned to several different states in our great nation, they don't understand. They think of California, they think of San Francisco and LA. They don't understand the agriculture in this area. They know about the tech industry, but there again, they don't understand the outside, the support structure that these immigrants provide. And someone who grew up with a grape vineyard in my backyard, and all of my friends were either farmers or they came from families of immigrants, field workers. Most people have just no comprehension as to how hard these immigrants work and the type of work that they perform out here. And you hit it right on the nail. These are not jobs that Americans will do. There is a reason why we have to hire people outside of our own country, because Americans just won't do that work, period. And you have so many of these farmers now that are absolutely freaking out. They have been the last few years because of the way immigration has tightened up. They cannot get the crews to pick the crops. So, and I heard the president just yesterday on a brief statement that he made, saying now they're reevaluating this, whether they don't want the farmers to be short. They don't want the hotel industry to be short. I mean, come on. This is a country of 360 million people. These are policies that should be thought out, planned out, not just implemented on a whim. And that's what I see here. Going after the criminals, 40 years of law enforcement, I support it 1,000%. But that is not what's happening here.
Tom, I have a simple question for you. Thousands of Fresnans turned out in protest at various locations, the No Kings protest. Are they being kept track of? In other words, if you go to a protest, are you being videotaped by someone from the FBI or someone from DOJ? And to your knowledge, is there an enemies list, or are they compiling people that voice opposition to the Trump administration?
Tom, any thoughts on you? I know you're retired from the FBI. Would FBI actually create a list like that? People that are showing up at protests. I mean, ordinary American citizens.
During my tenure, absolutely not. In fact, it's illegal. I mean, you have to be able to justify why you're out there taking action of any sort like that. They would try to pursue it maybe under a domestic terrorism, but even with a domestic terrorism caption, you have to be able to justify any activities that you're taking. And just to go out and randomly be taking photographs of people and going in and identifying, compiling a list in my past lifetime, I would say absolutely not. That's insane. Let's face it, back in the 60s during the Vietnam era, that was happening some, but then actions were taken to make sure, laws were written to make sure that didn't happen any further. And while I was working international terrorism, not going to belabor this, but it got so bad that we couldn't, if we knew a group of individuals were meeting to discuss acts of terrorism and they were inside of a religious location, we couldn't even copy down the license plates of the cars outside of this religious institution for fear that they were in there practicing their religion and not meeting for terrorism purposes. Now, that was changed. That allowed us to do that, but it was still, the rules were very, very tight. They're very strict on what the government can be in there doing. under this today's environment, don't have any firsthand knowledge that that's occurring. I would sure as hell hope that it has not gone to that extreme.